Hey guys, and welcome to my video regarding gacha gaming and gaming of the future. Now, I had planned to write an article about this, putting some more data in more of a text format, but then I watched this video from Josh Strife, Hayes, and I will link the original video down below, so you should definitely check it out. And I figured, why not do a more of a reaction video? So I've already watched this video. So it's not going to be a live reaction. I've already come up with some topics and things that were missed that needed to be expanded on. And this is already a 30-minute video. So what he did in 30 minutes was amazing. But I want to expand on this because I really want to dig deeper into the gaming market today and of the future. So this is the goal of this video. This is not going to be my usual gaming videos. This is going to be a look at the gaming industry. So we're going to watch along. I'm going to make comments, and the great thing is that I actually have... I happen to basically touch on all the games that he mentions for most of this video. So I can give you first-hand experience of what it was like for those games in those time periods. The only thing is that I never really went to arcades, so I can't comment on that, so a little bit of a spoiler for the video. But yes, so let's start it off.
Of video games. They've been my main hobby for most of my life, and now I make videos about video games, which is great. But recently, I've been analysing new games and critiquing new systems, and I've noticed a slow but insidious trend toward games becoming more and more monetized, but not fairly monetized. Anti-player monetized. It's the
Anti-player monetized. So this is going to be a recurring theme for the entire video. So he's going to explain it in his own words, but really it's that you are not... The product is not for you, you are the product, is basically the way that you have to look at it. So hopefully by the end of this video, it will shift your perspective on how you have to view video games going forward, and let's go from there.
feeling you get when you look at a battle pass in a game you've already paid full price for. It's the tiny slither of sadness when a game you want has different exclusive levels for different consoles, and you'll know you'll never get to experience every part of that game now. It's that cosmetic you want, costing 1,005 gems, but the gems are sold in packs of 1,004. It's the knowledge that year on year, the microtransactions from FIFA Ultimate Team alone make more money than Elden Ring's entire sale run. It's the unfortunate reality of gaming after the marketing executives took over, and it's hard to explain.
So, one of the things he touches on is how much FIFA Ultimate Team has earned in 1 year versus Elden Ring, and FIFA Ultimate Team wins. Every year they pull in more money than Elden Ring, and that's always... This is going to be basically the way the game industry is looked at in the future. How are these developers looking at making their games? Another quick one would be Puzzles and Dragons. This is a game I played. And this was a mobile game. In the 10 or so years that the game has been out, it's grossed $7 billion. US dollars. Equivalent. They're Japanese. But these games are gross. These mobile games, online games, MMOs are grossing so fast compared to standalone games. And this is where there's that huge shift in the industry, and one of the main reasons I wanted to talk about this and make a video on it, because if we don't support these standalone games, they won't be there in the future.
Explain exactly how or when it changed, but explaining things is what I do. So let's go back to the start of gaming and work out when this whole mess started. And then I'll actually pinpoint the exact thing, the specific design choice which makes new games feel wrong. Welcome, I'm Josh Strife. Let's work out what the hell went wrong with the monetization of gaming. As usual, a massive thank you to all the supporters on Patreon, Twitch, and YouTube who keep the channel alive. More information on how you can support at the end. For now, let's begin. Let's go back to the 1980s and early 1990s. The video game revolution was kicking off, but home consoles weren't yet mainstream, so we went to arcades. You put your money in and played the game, effectively making arcades the socially accepted pay-to-play model. There's no denying arcades were bloody expensive. I remember dropping way more than I should have done to complete Time Crisis, but while this was expensive, there was a very simple relationship between the game, the money, and the player. Pay money, get access to the whole game. Victory depends on your skill. Game designers knew it was a simple transaction, and they knew someone would simply play as long as they were able to, so they had to make the game hard so you would die more, and so pay more. This is why the Turtles game had that underwater bit, it's why House of the Dead bosses were damage sponges, it's why Ghosts and Goblins was everything that Ghosts and Goblins is. In the early days of home consoles, when people would rent games, we even called difficult levels blockbuster levels, designed to make the rental period longer, and so you'd have to keep renewing it. So why don't these money-hungry games make us feel the same way as modern money-hungry games? Well, it's because the trade of money for game was simple, and there was nothing insidious about the transaction itself. You knew what you were giving, and you knew what you were getting. And if you were to break down the design time of a game into a pie chart at that point, it might look something like this. Story, graphics, narrative connections between them, mechanics, marketing, playtesting, and then how much a go at the arcade costs. There was a lot going on in the development of a game at these times, but it's all focused on making a game good, because at that time, good games make the most money. When a company discovered a successful game, they couldn't just augment the original with downloadable content or extra levels because that technology didn't exist yet. They'd have to make a complete sequel, and so gamers got more games. Jump forward to the mid-1990s, the home console market had taken off. You buy a console, you buy a game.
So as I mentioned, I was not an arcade kid. I never went to the arcade, so I really can't comment on that, but it seems straightforward enough. When we get into more of the monetization techniques and the discussions on those, that's where I'll have quite a bit more experience to share, because if you're watching this video, it probably means that you're subscribed to me, and if you're subscribed to me, you know that I play a lot of heavily monetized games. Surprise, surprise.
And then you play that game. Now, the whole lives mechanic in games at this time was a holdover from the arcade design space and wasn't actually needed in home consoles because you didn't need the player to put more money in. Dying when you have 3 lives, then restarting from your last save, or just dying and restarting from the save anyway with no arbitrary life limit was functionally the same thing, but design moves slowly. Away from the arcade model, you no longer paid per play, and you now paid per game, and you then played as much as you wanted. Games were expensive, of course, but when you bought a game, it was complete. If it shipped with bugs, it would just have bugs forever. If it shipped with secret unlockable stuff, it would have that forever. When you owned the game, you owned the ability to play as much as you want of the complete experience. And this was a very simple and fair transaction. While the arcade was, here's a game, pay us to have a go, the console was, here's a game, pay us to keep it and play it whenever. But the home gaming scene wasn't just consoles, it was also PCs. Now, back then, PC gaming wasn't as mainstream as it is today, but it did come with one major advantage. Because the PC held a load of data files on its hard drive instead of just reading them from the disk or cart like a console, developers could create additional content for a game and sell that. Like the incredible RPG Baldur's Gate, releasing in 1998, and then the multi-hour-long expansion Tales of the Sword Coast in 1999. This was a time in gaming where developers could develop additional content, but when they did, it was usually a lot of content. PC games saw expansion after expansion, Morrowind seeing the Tribunal and Blood Moon expansions, Diablo 2, then the Lord of Destruction expansion, and all the extra modules for Neverwinter Nights. This was additional content for a game without being a sequel, but again, gamers didn't hate this because the transaction was very simple to understand and it felt fair. You gave them money, you got an experience designed to be the most fun it could possibly be. The biggest difference in this era is there's no trickery. You're not being manipulated, it's just a straight-up understandable product. If we again take the idea of breaking down game development time into a pie chart, you've probably got a few new bits to the pie by now, magazine adverts and articles, some TV ads, and the arcade price replaced with a box price. But it is still mostly, make a good game, and you will make good money. Then in 2004, online gaming really started to kick off, with World of Warcraft being released, but Blizzard aren't the bad guys in this story.
So yes, the great thing is that there are still companies that produce a game that you can pay one time for. And FromSoft, big shout out to them. Elden Ring, Dark Souls games. Yes, there's our DLC, but it's quite simplified. We have Square Enix, which at least some of their games are box price, as we discussed from the 1990s, 2000s era. But we're going to be heading into the MMO scene, where that's where things change. And he does miss something here, and I'll talk about it at the end.
At least not yet. For now, we need to look to the east, to another popular online game from Korea called MapleStory. Now, in Japan, the small toy capsules gachapon had been popular for years. You put money into a gachapon machine and get a random toy of varying rarity. These systems appeal to people who like collecting things and people who like random chance or mystery. It's basically gambling on a rather inconsequential level, but the psychology behind it is very, very powerful. So MapleStory introduced an in-game gachapon-style system. 100 yen got you a ticket for a random in-game item, and many people consider this to be the first example of a random loot box. But more importantly, this was the first moment in mainstream video games where you could pay money and not know what you were getting. You were no longer paying for the game or for an established product, you were paying for the mystery. The ephemeral moment of what if between purchase and eventual prize. And this system made a lot of money, because MapleStory was online and other people could see what you won. So it was no longer about having the game and enjoying the game, it was now about a sense of community and prestige when you have something somebody else doesn't. If you make your game multiplayer, competition amongst players becomes a thing, and there are a subset of players who enjoy being seen as the person with the best stuff. And unlike real gachapon machines, which were either a physical distance to travel to or had a queue by them or sometimes just sold out, virtual gachapon tickets were unlimited, entirely within the company's control, and could be bought constantly. MapleStory already had the in-game items made, so they were selling the excitement of chance, and they were tapping into the collector and completionist mentality of many hardcore gamers. So game developers began to see they didn't actually need to sell a gaming experience anymore. They could instead sell the small adrenaline spike of potential. This was a turning point. A moment investors realized it was completely worthwhile to dedicate at least some game development time, not to the game itself, itself, but to systems within the game designed simply to extract money from the player after they had started playing, but without giving them a complete new game. This is the first part of the puzzle for where we are today. So let's put this idea of sell random chance into...
Okay, so let's break this down. There's going to be two parts. Before MapleStory, we still had games that required an online subscription. So, as he mentions, really the key thing that MapleStory introduced was that chance portion of you pay, you get something else. But it's not the first time that we've seen where businesses are trying to extract profits regularly from a player. RuneScape memberships, World of Warcraft memberships, he mentions both of those. And I was playing MapleStory when the Gachapon was released, and I still have very, very strong memories about it, for better or for worse. So here's what happened. One day a patch drops, and oh, what's this? Gachapon is added to the game. The thing about the Gachapon is that it had unique items. It wasn't just items that you could naturally get. It had unique items that you could only get in the Gachapon that could be better than what you could get otherwise. So it was not only just progressing faster and skipping something, you could just generally get better gear. And I remember very uniquely, there's a few of the super important items from the Gachapon, and Gachapon only, something like the brown work gloves. So in MapleStory, you had to roll, you had to buy scrolls that had a % chance to add a stat to an item. And each item had a certain number of slots available for basically enchantments or gear ups or whatever. And whether you failed or succeeded, you would lose the slot. So if an item had 5 slots for enchantments, you could enchant it up to 5 times. But you would just lose the slot if it failed. And the scrolls with the best stat upgrades were 10%. But the Gachapon comes along, and it adds 3 things. Items with more slots, a white scroll, so you use this in conjunction with a normal scroll so that if it failed, you did not lose the slot. So now that if you had enough money, you could guarantee perfectly rolled items, and you could also, from the Gachapon, get scrolls that have a higher % chance of succeeding, but also have a tiny chance of breaking the item completely if it broke. And so this was really important. So one of the key items back then was the set of brown work gloves, because every single character in the game, or virtually every single DPS, is always going to need an attack stat, and gloves roll an attack stat. But the normal gloves that you get do not have as many slots as the Gachapon variant of the brown work glove, and the brown work glove could be put on any single class. So it became, the whole market in MapleStory was around work gloves, because they could be transferred between each of the player's characters, and players often had multiple characters. So having a brown work glove, which you can put on any character at virtually any level, so I think it was level 10, and have better stats than any other variants that they could use, was incredibly strong. And so that was one of the reasons you would buy the gacha. And then, of course, the white scrolls. So obviously your end game weapon that takes 50 to 100 hours a week farming, whatever. You get the point. You get one of these items for millions of pesos, or whatever the game, mesos or something, used. You obviously want it to roll well. It's not something that you come by often, and the thing is, MapleStory also had RNG stats on drops. So obviously, if you had like a perfectly rolled drop, you would want it to succeed and be perfectly, upgraded too. So that's where the white scrolls came in, because you wouldn't have that many chances of perfectly rolled base drops of endgame gear. There were things that only world bosses dropped, and there were only a certain number of slots that you could actually attempt a world boss in. So all of these things led to the Gachapon being incredibly popular. Now he mentions other things like being able to show off, which is true, because the Gachapon also had limited cosmetics. Yes, limited cosmetics. So if you wanted to show off, besides just the normal cash shop, you had the gachapon as well, which had even rarer cosmetics that other people wouldn't get. But it wasn't the first time they added a randomization. They also, I'm pretty sure, they had randomized eye styles and hairstyles before they added gachapon. I'm pretty sure. But if somebody else played MapleStory during that period and remembers better than that, let me know. But yes, exactly. This is gachapon. You got random improvements you could get random improvements for your character from real money, and you did not know that you were going to get an improvement or not. So and the thing is, as I mentioned, it's multiple systems happening at once, where even if you get the brown work glove by itself, it doesn't mean anything, because you had to upgrade it too, which was RNG in itself, and you had to get the scrolls to upgrade it, which was also RNG. Anyway, we're stacking RNG on RNG on RNG, so there was a lot of potential to make a lot of money, because as you go through the number of work gloves or the number of scrolls that you need or whatever it is you're doing, there was not a high chance to get the good stuff, and that's where the cost comes from.
A box of all the design tricks which don't favour the player or make the game necessarily any better. A box of design tricks which don't make you think, oh my god, this is amazing, I need to tell all my friends, but instead use the game as a simple vehicle for additional monetization. Now, the techniques in this box are not games themselves. They cannot exist on their own. They aren't symbiotic with a game because they don't enhance each other. They are parasitic because they need the game to survive but don't necessarily improve it. We'll call this box Abusive Monetization Strategies, or from a more catchy title, Pandora's Box of Bad Design. The main danger of this box is, if we were to take the pie chart of game development time now, knowing that this box exists and knowing the techniques inside it can make a decent amount of money, the finance people know they need to find space for the techniques within this box somewhere on the pie chart, which means something else must lose out. Jump forward 2 years to 2006. The Western gaming market hasn't yet discovered the mass appeal and psychological dominance that loot boxes have, but they have discovered something just as important. Gamers will pay money to look different, and it all kicks off with this stupid horse. Now, I've made a complete video on the history of this horse, but the short story is The Elder Scrolls Oblivion was a great game with some great DLC, Knights of the Nine and the Shiv.
As I mentioned, MapleStory had cosmetics, cash cosmetics, very, very early. But either way, he's going to talk about this horse.
But you can also pay a few dollars to give your horse armor. Now, it's important to understand this is completely cosmetic. It doesn't actually make your horse any better in combat or defend it, but you can buy it. And people did. In fact, a lot of people bought it. And this highlighted another thing. Making a game takes a long time, but once the main game is made, the development time it would take to make a cosmetic for that game is relatively short. And that cosmetic can be sold for a small amount of money, but it can be sold many, many times. The cost is micro, but the sales volume is high, hence microtransaction. Separate from the idea of a complete expansion, which would expand the game and make the game experience bigger, a microtransaction adds hardly anything beyond the original experience. It's almost inconsequential, but it's not free. So now developers know expansions are a bit risky, but microtransactions are very safe and very small. Even if they don't sell, it's not a great waste of developer time. So the focus shifted away from selling a main game with lots of expansions to selling the main game and then lots and lots and lots and lots of small additional things. The problem with this is now developers had a vested interest in keeping the coolest cosmetics or the most fun little things out of the base game and instead releasing them as additional microtransactions, which is something we'll see happen more and more. And this absolutely does not favor the player, because it leads to an experience where you as a player, even though you have bought the game, when you sit down to play it, you do not feel like you have access to the whole game, because you don't. It used to be you bought a game and got a game. Now it's you buy a game and you get the main framework, which you need to pay more to flesh out. So let's add sell small additions to your game as microtransactions to the box of abusive monetization strategies. And as the box grows, so does the space it would need to take up on the game development pie. Now we head into 2000.
So great coverage there of discussion. Where do developers spend their time, especially after they make the game? And some companies, or maybe employees of companies, have discussed it's much easier to just have your core developers or senior developers, whatever it is, create the game itself, and then have your junior developers work on expansions and long-term support, as well as having some cosmetic teams where they can just create these little add-ons here and there to generate more money from the same game, while the core developers are working on either a big expansion or a new title.
2009 to the rise of Facebook and one of the cornerstones of casual gaming and monetization progression, Farmville. Farmville was everywhere in the late 2000s, made by Zynga, and these guys were masters because Facebook was everywhere, everyone was on it, and even non-gamers were gaming, which sounds great, but they were burning through the game too quickly. They were enjoying it and then just moving on, which was not great because Facebook is all about retention. So Farmville did something really counterintuitive to increase player retention. They gave you daily energy, so you couldn't progress more than a certain amount every day. Now, these games were mostly played by people on phones and laptops, and people got bored pretty quickly. And one of the best ways to prevent boredom is to limit your time with something. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, as they say. So energy systems limiting what actions you could take, or timers connected to growing your crops or building things and you couldn't progress them quicker. By making the player progress only in short but intense bursts and then wait for their next fix of game, you either force them to pay more money to gain more energy or to skip the timers, or you make them return tomorrow. And this is game design focused on the formation of daily habits. The psychological power of the habit has been studied for years. Motivational speakers talk about them, self-help books push them, and now gaming companies were looking to use them as a way to turn players into users. Because it wasn't just about the game being fun anymore. The focus wasn't on giving the player the best experience you could give them and letting the player enjoy it at their own pace. The focus was about the game being effective at encouraging a specific behavior response from the user. Encouraging the user to return day after day is habit forming. Someone who plays your game habitually is more likely to remain playing even after the game itself has stopped being enjoyable. They're just continuing the habit. Along with this, game designers knew you would also have friends on Facebook that may not be playing the game, and they wanted those friends to play the game, which is why they put the mechanics in the game of share this achievement with your friend to get bonuses and get boosts. A huge amount of people began playing Facebook games not because they thought they would be the type of game they enjoy, but because they were doing their friend a favor by starting up. They were supporting their farm. They were joining their mafia. And just like MapleStory's gacha being viewed by the players in the game, you could share the progress of your farm. You could show off how far along you were, which spurred competition. So we can add limiting progression per day and encouraging you to invite your friends to start the game to give yourself advantages, or the ability to share your progression with the community, which is why achievements on almost all consoles and PCs are publicly viewable.
This was such a huge thing. Sharing games on Facebook for bonuses, and Candy Crush Saga, as well as Farmville, among other things, were absolutely massive on this. I remember, I believe when Candy Crush came out, something like you had to get 5 friends to play the game, or you had to invite 5 friends to play the game. I believe it kept track of the friends you've already invited, so, you know, those 300 friends you had from school or whatever, it could burn through fast if you kept going up and up in Candy Crush, or you had to pay. And this is really key. So in these games, it was really easy to just, you know, send an invite out, and, you know, the assumption was everyone just got tired and just stopped clicking on them and would just ignore them, whatever. So you didn't really feel that bad if you just sent some random person an invite. Not that I ever really played these games, but for me, it's just, I knew my friends were just getting the bonuses and I would just click ignore, whatever. But then you end up in this really difficult spot. So Candy Crush specifically, I remember, you could not progress unless you invited or paid. It wasn't that you just sped something up or got a little bonus, is that you specifically had to pay to keep unlocking levels or you were permanently capped. So if you ran out of friends to invite, what do? Now you're so invested in this game. So it was a really easy thing to start pulling players into purchasing to unlock levels. Among some of the other really, I would say, shady stuff that Candy Crush did. I'm not going to go too much into it, besides the fact that they basically stole the game, and have pay-to-win boosts that you can use. Anyway, he also talks about another really important thing, daily habits. And now, I've opened a few gacha games. Let's go with Arknights, because I know exactly where to go check for dailies. So let's go with Arknights. I can go, oh, look at that, dailies. There's my dailies, there's my weeklies. And these things are designed to give you rewards and train you to come back every single day. And this is really important because they want you to spend time on the game and open the game every single day. And now Arknights, I would probably have to spend a whole video on this. I find Arknights has some of the lowest monetization of a gacha game, but it's still a gacha game and still has a lot of the features of a gacha game. And then if I were to talk about other gacha games, which I will later, you'll see that they have extremely heavy monetization and in-your-face monetization of every time you're doing a daily or something like that, it always comes back to seeing how much can we take from this player. the thing about the daily habits is that, think of it this way. Josh misses this part. So he talks about how psychologists show the strength of a daily habit. And this is the strength of keeping a player retained within the game. But then there's also the strength of, psychologically, the sunk cost fallacy is something that he kind of touches on in this video later, but doesn't really specify it. The sunk cost fallacy is where you've spent a certain amount of time or money already in the game, so you're more willing and more likely to continue this trend. Think of it this way. In some places, they might call it gambler's fallacy if we're talking specifically about spending money. The gambler's fallacy thinking that you are more likely to win because you've already spent X amount on whatever random chance. But realistically, the next pull of the slot machine, the next roll of the dice, does not have a greater chance. But that's the gambler's fallacy. And then, so this sunk cost fallacy works in a very similar way, where you continue because you see all this investment that you've already made, and you can't let go of that. So those Candy Crush players that got to whatever, 100 levels, 1,000 levels, whatever, I don't really know, don't really care, but then had no more friends to invite, well, they've already invested all that time and effort to getting to that level. What's $5 to unlock the next 5 levels or 10 levels or whatever it was? So that sunk cost fallacy is something that plays a role again and again and again in virtually every single game going forward in this video, and in any of the other games that I'm going to be talking about in this video as well.
Into the box of abusive monetization strategies. And while habitually playing something isn't generating money in itself, it does keep the audience around longer so they can be exposed to other, more successful strategies. Now, some people will point out that paying to advance more or paying to skip timers is in some ways similar to the old arcade process of dying and then putting more coins in to continue. And it is similar, but there is a crucial difference. With an arcade game, you could, in theory, finish the game entirely on skill. These timers and energy bars in games such as Farmville cannot ever be finished on skill alone, because you will hit a wall that you will need to either wait for or pay to remove. But this wasn't everything. Nowhere near. Farmville had other strategies. You had timers and you could pay to make them progress faster, but not with money directly. Now you had to convert real money into a proprietary currency, in this case, farm bucks. And this is one of the most prevalent designs we still see used, because it does several psychological things disgustingly well. If you can buy something directly from a game, you can see the cost in a currency that you understand. But if the game displays items in their own proprietary currency, such as gems or coins or platinum or farm bucks or whatever they want to call it, you have to make one mental step converting the currency from what you understand to what you don't understand. So all these things are now one mental step away from having real value, and that is hugely important, because even one step is further than most people are willing to go. So let's add that into the box. Proprietary in-game premium currency to obscure real-world value by a single step.
So I'll pause it right here. I'm going to pull over this. I have this emulator open for this game that I have already quit, but I'm pulling it open. Looking at this screen, how much does it cost me to pull for a character? Immediately, so the prices are here. I have 3 different prices for basically the same thing. I can use paid gems to summon once. I can use other gems to summon once for 3 times the number of gems. Or I can use 2,800 gems to summon 10 times. So here are 3 prices, all based on gems, which are the premium currency. And I have one for 100, one for 280, and one for 300. So immediately I'm presented with 3 different prices. So what does it cost to actually pull a character? But really, it depends on what I'm using it. So it's adding these mental steps and the mental calculation of how much am I spending here. And then let's go to the actual prices for the gems. Where is it? Look at all of this. Look at all of this. So how do I actually get these pulls? So whatever, let's click on this one. I get 8,000 gems, 400 free gems, so 8,400 gems when I purchase this. But what's very common in games these days is that they will add little bundles in to help obscure what you're actually spending on, because mentally you're going to go, okay, well, this is worth something to me, so I'm getting more. But anyway, so you're obscuring the value of the actual gems, but let's say that you were to purchase the base 8,000 gems, or here, 80 gems for $1. That's quite a bit different. Actually, it's not that different. You don't seem to get that many bonus gems in this game. But here, one time only, 8,000 plus 4,000 gems for $100, while this one is 8,000 plus 400. So you have a 3,600 gem gap for the same price. Now, obviously, this is one time only, but again, we're talking about how much does it actually cost to pull a character. And the other part is, in these gacha games, is that you actually have to look at the rates, because it's not some kind of standardized thing in the industry of what the chances are to get a character. You have to go click. Okay, well then you have a 3% chance in this pool. And of that 3%, the rate up, the one that you're pulling for, that you ideally want, is only of 0.69%. So what is the actual price that I'm paying? What is the average that I would have to pay to even get her, or the character, or whatever it is you're pulling for? And this is something that I have rarely seen people do while running communities, speaking in communities, all of these things. I virtually never see people even sit down with the games that they play and do that mental calculation of what is the average that I have to spend to pull a character. And when we speak in gacha terms, pulling is obtaining the character. So when Josh talks about that mental step of converting currencies, it is a very powerful step. And the other thing is, while this game mixes or separates paid versus unpaid, a lot of games will not separate this. So you have currency that you're receiving from the game, either from that daily system, as we spoke about, that habit-building daily system, or through purchases, or through events, or gifts, or whatever it is. And it all funnels into the same pool. So sometimes it looks like you have a lot more than you really have, because there's some free and some purchased. But then when you get down to it, it says, oh wow, it's actually really expensive to purchase more. And one game I'll call out specifically is Princess Connect, which ironically just closed, at least in the global region. I think the Japanese servers are still up as of the making of this video. But Princess Connect, you got free gems everywhere. And for the early part, so every time you did story, every time you cleared story, every time you beat somebody in arena, the PvP system, you got gems out the wazoo at the beginning. So for the first month or so, you were just swimming in gems. You could pull for every character that you saw. And then it just stops, because it was all just one-time rewards. So, but you're used to having a certain number of gems. And all these games, what they do is they build that idea that you have plenty of gems, and and these are the different systems that you can spend them on, but then that income slows down. One game in particular, Genshin Impact, I calculated that the average cost to pull a character from just the free daily gems to complete a character, I should specify complete a character, it would take you 5 years. Now, this is based on the rates from when the game first launched. I haven't been playing the game. I haven't looked up the new rates. I can't tell you what they are right now. So that probably has changed by now. But that's staggering to think about, that you would have to plan 5 years ahead of time who you're going to pull for, because that's 5 years of time investment wasted or lost. Anyway, let's continue the video.
bonus points if it makes you convert the currency to multiple other in-game currencies, which is almost completely impossible to track in your own mind. So you need to buy the currency, and this is the next trick. The currency is usually sold in packs, and these packs are specifically sized to either be just under what you actually need or very, very close to the next best thing, making you consider the next pack up. For example, if you need 100 gems to buy something in the game and gem packs are sold in packs of 90 or 205, you may as well buy the 205 pack. But then there's a really good item in the game for 210, and you're only 5 gems short. But the next pack contains 500 gems. But there's a mega item for 505 gems, and you're only 5 gems shy of that now. You're not thinking about the number 505, you're thinking it's only 5 and then only another 5. Much smaller jumps for much higher jumps in value. You'd be a fool if you didn't take them, right? So that's going in the box of bad design. But let's say you do buy a pack. Whatever pack you buy, you will spend your unique...
Another pause right here. So let's go back to... I'm going to show you 2 games now. So we already took a look at this. What's the most expensive pack here? When we look at this, this is called Eminence and Shadow. What's the most expensive pack? Well, the most expensive pack is $100. $100. And then I go to this other game. $100. And this is very much intentional in gacha games. Why it costs $100 or whatever it is in the equivalent currency. Why in Genshin Impact it's the same thing. I think it was $100 for the biggest pack. But when you calculate out the average cost to finish a character, it's around $2,000. Yes, $2,000 for one character. So why is it that the pack is priced at $100? Well, you buy the pack, you spend the currency in the pack, and then the next purchase is, well, it's only $100. And so when I speak about the sunk cost fallacy, is that all your purchases prior to this point, you're weighing that in your mind versus the, well, it's only $100 more. So for me, I mean, I didn't spend really anything in Eminence and Shadow, but I did spend in Arknights. So for me, when I'm rolling, obviously I'm aware of all these monetization strategies and I'm going to call them abuses, psychological abuses. For me, it says, okay, well, I've already spent X amount in Arknights, what's another $100? Or for other players, it might be, I've already spent $100, what's another $15? But you spend $15. And then you don't get what you want, and then you spend another $15, and then you don't get what you want. And eventually, you work up the scale of what's another $30, what's another $50, what's another $100. And each of these packs gives you progressively better value. You get slightly more current total currency the more you go up in the pack price. So eventually you hit this point, what's another $100? Or what's another $99.99, because that's also been shown that psychologically people don't see this as impactful as $100, like actually 100.00. So, yeah, it's not just in a per pack situation, it's also in a lifetime situation of what's just another $100 to the pool. But then that can very quickly add up to 5 figures. I've seen people that have spent 6 figures within a month of the game releasing. So, things to think about.
In-game proprietary currency, but then you'll discover something else. The currency is non-refundable, and it is almost impossible to spend all of it. You'll always be left with some random number, like 4 gems or 2 bits of platinum. It's never 0. And this will bother you, because in your mind, that's a waste, and you don't like waste. And if you don't spend that currency, then the game is keeping it, and you've paid for that. But the only way to make this useful is to buy another currency pack. I mean, you'd be a fool if you didn't do that, right? You can't have premium currency just sitting there in strange, unspendable amounts. It's annoying, and it's by design. So add that to the box. But maybe you know all this, and you're not a fool. You won't spend a lot, you'll wait for a sale, but oh look, you're a brand new player, and there's an offer. A load of premium currency, a boost, a few cosmetics. It's a limited time offer, and it's all for the low price of just under $1. Now
the funniest part about this, the 800% extra value, this one image was broken down so much for Diablo Immortal because you can't actually do anything with 60 premium currency. And this is by design because, as he just mentioned, you're gonna be, if you buy this first, that's beginner's pack, you think, okay, cool, I can do something with this. You're just going to be left with premium currency that just sits around.
You'd definitely be a fool if you didn't buy this. If you've ever wondered why the intro packs to almost any game are such good value, it's because studies have shown people who buy a single purchase are much more likely to make another purchase. So you want to make the first purchase really enticing. And it's because some phones need you to authorize in-app purchases, but once you've authorized one, it will not double check for any extra purchases. So you confirm that you want to buy the cheap pack, and then it doesn't double check for the expensive packs, because every screen between the player and a purchase is a moment they could doubt and reconsider. So you want to get those, are you sure you want to purchase this checks, agreed with and out the way early. Unusually cheap intro microtransactions just to get you into a habit. Let's add that to the box. And while the box is looking pretty anti-player and anti-consumer,
this is huge. He touches on quite a few different aspects here. One, saving payment information. Every single monetized game is going to give you the opportunity to save payment information and have faster checkouts. And I think either he just mentioned it or will mention it. It's about reducing the number of time that you can, in your mind, change your decision, your purchase decision. Say, wait a moment, I really don't need this in the game. So let me back off. I've spent enough, or whatever it is for you. And for that, for each player, that's different. And this is why when we speak about gacha games and well, people call them strategies, for controlling themselves. I hate the fact that we have to do this and have people talk about it as if it should just be a thing. The strategies being set a limit for yourself up front, and that's it. That's all you spend. Whether it be you go buy a gift card or you just have really good willpower to just stop right there and then, whatever your result is. That's the strategy of just stopping. And you can even ask Google Play or Apple. They will not restrict your account based on how much you spend. So if your card keeps passing, that's it. Your card keeps passing, or whatever it is that you use to spend. So it is extremely abusive.
consumer so far, it's nowhere near full. To truly see how effective this ugly design can be, we only need to go forward 1 year to 2010 and look at FIFA's Ultimate Team mode. Now, I'm not really into football games, but the FIFA franchise of games actually highlights the game design shift really well. It shows how games have moved from being a fun experience by themselves to a fun enough framework that other monetization tactics will cling to like limpets. In FIFA, you can buy loot boxes, which contain random cards of players, and use these to build up your Ultimate Team. The Ultimate Team mode takes several of the box ideas and combines them, and now the Ultimate Team mode makes more money than the box sales of FIFA itself. In fact, since 2018, FIFA Ultimate Team has generated over $1 billion in revenue per year for EA. In 2021, they made $1.6 billion. And it happens every single year. And the cards you buy in the Ultimate Team for 1 year cannot be used in the next year, meaning the microtransactions now have a shelf life. Horse armor may last forever, but what if it didn't? What if you could make a player pay for it again and again every year? Let's add that to the box. Yearly repeating microtransactions. Now, as a developer, you'd look at this box, and think, wow, selling my game.
I'm just going to stop it right there. I remember reading an article because this is one of the games that I've never played. I was not big into the sports games. Besides the early EA Sports games on the GameCube or PlayStation or whatever, which did not have expansions. So I never touched Ultimate Team. I've only heard about it in passing and looked it up and did a bit of research. It's crazy. And specifically Ultimate Team is that there's different player levels. So they have different stat lines depending on whatever rarity, and it could be the same player. My understanding is the same player could have different stats just based on your luck. And I remember that the pro players, pro as in not like the football players, but the gamers, the video gamers that compete in FIFA have to spend somewhere upwards of $20,000 a year to make a competitive team to continue competing. And I thought that was nuts. You have to pay EA $20,000 a year to compete. Oh god, that was insane. And that's not including travel costs. That was the actual just yearly expenditure to get your team going.
Isn't the profitable thing anymore. It's what I can sell within the game. By now, the box of abusive monetization strategies is so big, it's almost impossible to ignore if you are making a game. 1 year later, in 2011, the MMORPG RuneScape is suffering. They had a major update to the combat system, which a huge majority of the player base hated, and this made them lose a lot of players. This is a mistake worthy of its own video, but the bottom line is, they are a monthly subscription game losing subscribing players, and they need to find a way to either recover paying members or to stem the tide of people leaving. Enter the loyalty program. Every month of membership, you now earn loyalty points, and you earn more for every consecutive month that you remain subscribed. And then you can spend loyalty points on cool exclusive cosmetics.
So here's the key part. So remember I spoke about sunk cost fallacy. You earn more the longer you are subscribed. That's sunk cost fallacy. So if your subscription took 2 years to get to that level of earning, that in your mind is 2 years of value, while the next month is just 1 month. So this sunk cost fallacy is going to come back a lot in my discussions. He never outright names it, but when I spoke about how he touches on it, this is it.
Or mechanically powerful auras and boosts. So now, cancelling your membership wasn't just a case of thinking, I'm not enjoying the game, so I won't pay, which is a very simple, understandable, fair transaction. It's now a case of thinking, I'm not enjoying the game, but if I unsubscribe, I break my loyalty streak and will earn far fewer loyalty points over the long run, which will put me at a disadvantage if I ever do want to come back in the future, which is not as fair. The transaction used to be simple, but now we're putting the player in the position of give money even if you don't want to play, because you don't want to break a habit. That's going in the box. And by now, the box is demanding a bigger and bigger slice of the game design pie chart. 2 years later, 2013 sees the release of Dead Space 3, the third installment in a terrific horror trilogy. Well, sort of. While Dead Space 1 and 2 were indeed terrific horror games with tension and pacing and balanced gameplay and great stories, Dead Space 3 did something strange. It took the idea of you being a lone engineer trapped on an infested spaceship, struggling against incredible odds, using only your small collection of mining tools and very limited ammunition to survive, and it added in the ability to let you buy in-game guns with real cash from the cash shop. A horror survival game selling you in-game guns and ammo, completely defeating the atmosphere and vibe the game was going for. Selling players things they could use within your game to make the game easier. Let's add that to the box. That's effectively selling power. This one manages.
As I mentioned with Maple Story, selling power is not something that was new. Back in, and this is something that he completely, I don't know if I would say missed, in EA's Battlefield 3. This was the moment that I really started to hate EA, was with Battlefield 3. I had not known about Ultimate Team from 2010. But Battlefield 3 released in 2011, and this is coming off of Battlefield 2 Bad Company, both of which were amazing games. And Battlefield 3 introduced much stronger DLC, where you had to pay for a battle. They called it a battle pass. It was really just 5 DLCs that were going to be upcoming. And each DLC introduced new guns. The first DLC that came out, and since I had put the most time into sniping, I remember the sniper in particular, the new sniper that they released with the DLC had better bullet drop, better velocity, better ADS stat. Like, literally every stat was better for this DLC gun, for this DLC sniper gun, than anything that was available in the base game. And remember, this is a multiplayer online game where I'm playing against other players. So if I don't have it, I have a disadvantage. Or if I have it and the other player doesn't have it, I'm at a significant advantage. So while you could kind of overcome that gap with skill, they were still selling power.
To out-monetize even the arcade. It would be like putting more coins into Time Crisis and getting a rocket launcher, or removing the time limit in Crazy Taxi. It sort of defeats the purpose of the original game. Along with Dead Space selling guns, we now see the MOBA game Dota 2 release what many consider the first major Battle Pass system. Now, when this craze started, I remember walking into gaming shops and seeing the phrase Battle Pass everywhere, and I had no idea what they were. Effectively, they are optional purchases which unlock a series of challenges or processes you can go through to unlock more stuff in the game, but they are time sensitive. So you buy the monthly Battle Pass, and if you play a certain number of hours, or kill a certain number of enemies, or achieve a certain number of whatever it wants you to do, you can advance along the Battle Pass and unlock new stuff. Now, you could just have the unlockable stuff be available for everyone to unlock anyway, but by limiting it to a timed battle pass, you're doing a few manipulative things. You're creating a fear of missing out, or FOMO, as players know if they don't have this month's battle pass, they may never get the full experience or that rare cosmetic ever again. So you are encouraging an unhealthy amount of gameplay, because if you're not advancing your battle pass, you're losing precious time. So
this is absolutely huge in virtually all PC games these days, especially in the North American market. Apex Legends, Warzone, Halo, doesn't matter. There's always a battle pass in every single game now. And the battle passes are specifically designed so that the average amount of playtime that somebody has is just enough, more or less, to complete the battle pass over the period. And this is extremely key because they want you, as he mentions, FOMO, and they want you to not play other games so that you play that game more. So this is where there's still a competition of making your game more fun for the player, but then they also use other... Anyway, I'm not going to get into the other techniques that they use now to make it feel more fun to you psychologically, but let's just say there is still a bit of a competition for the player attention of, you might have 10 different games and each of them has a battle pass, and now you have to decide which one you're going to play, buy the battle pass for and actually complete for that season, whatever that season may be, whether it's a month, 3 months. I know Apex is, I believe, 90 days, so about 3 months. So if you decide to go with a battle pass in Apex, that's 90 days of your average person's playtime that you have to commit. And I have friends that I remember in the last couple of weeks, they upped their playtime just to complete the battle pass. And the other thing is they also always give you the opportunity to purchase the last few levels. So while the battle passes are in every single game designed to be something cheap to purchase, and while you'd be a fool not to get it because there's so much value, one is that you go back to, remember, making that first purchase. So it's not necessarily that $1 bundle. You might say, okay, well, the battle pass is the best value. In Apex, it really is the battle pass that has the best value. In Warzone, it's the same thing. The battle pass has the best value, and I can't speak for all games because I don't play all games. But yeah, usually the battle pass has virtually the best value in a lot of these games.
Now you're actually discouraging players from enjoying any other game and forcing them to focus entirely on progression within yours. This design is of course at odds with the limit playtime technique because they appeal to different demographics. Remember, a battle pass or limited time progression track doesn't always actively improve a game, but it does always increase that game's revenue, so throw it in the box. By now, even the concept of a fun, well-made game is starting to look like a horrifically augmented shadow of its former self. Imagine what a well-made game would look like if you tried to shoehorn in all of the techniques in this box. And unfortunately, eventually, you won't need to imagine. We're seeing it more and more. Later that same year, one of my favorite games comes out. Assassin's Creed Black Flag, a fantastic pirate game. There's just one problem. Unless you own both the PlayStation and an Xbox and are willing to buy 2 copies of the game, you can never experience the full game. Black Flag featured console-exclusive levels, which not only fueled the petty console wars, but also highlighted the fact that marketing executives were now powerful enough to tell games developers exactly what their players deserved, or more importantly, what their non-players don't deserve. This is not player-focused design at all. And while I completely understand the power of console exclusives, when I walked into a game shop and picked up 2 copies of Black Flag and realized no matter what I choose, there is a mission I won't get to play because I don't have the right console, that didn't leave a good taste in my mouth. So while Dota may have started the Battle Pass idea, it was almost perfected 4 years later in 2017 by Fortnite Season 2, which replaced the Season shop with a Battle Pass system. And then later in November of 2017...
So yeah, like I mentioned, this Battle Pass system is insidious. It's there to really just keep your attention for the entire period of the Battle Pass for the average player. Now, if you somehow have tons and tons of time to play multiple games, yeah, you can play multiple and complete multiple Battle Pass tracks. Or if you're willing to spend that little bit of extra, you could just buy the rest of the levels that you couldn't complete. And this is a very common thing. So you go from this extremely great value to the fact that you just have to purchase it outright because of that fear of missing out. And gacha games use that fear of missing out. So while not all of them necessarily use a battle pass system, I find it's actually more on the rare side that they do. The fear of missing out comes from limited characters that will only ever appear once, or you don't know if they'll ever reappear down the line, but you know that right now you have 1 week to obtain them, and that's it. And then here we hit, this is the most ironic one for me, so I'll let him explain and then I'll talk about it.
we witness a bit of gaming history, and it fills us all with a sense of pride and accomplishment. Star Wars Battlefront 2 was an amazing game which released back in 2005, not to be confused with Star Wars Battlefront 2, which was a mediocre game which released in 2017. It was a full-price game and yet also had a loot box system in it along with premium currency system. This led to a Reddit user complaining that even though they'd bought the $80 deluxe version of the game, they still couldn't play as Darth Vader from day one. Unlocking Darth Vader means buying his hero crate, which costs 60,000 in-game credits, or you can spend real money. Now, you can earn an average of 250 credits per 10-minute match at the time, so you'd have to grind for roughly 40 hours of constant gameplay, longer than the average completion time of most video games, to unlock a single rare character. Or you could pay crystals in the premium shop and spend those on hero crates and just hope. EA responded to this Reddit complaint saying the reason crates were so expensive or take so long to unlock is to give a sense of pride and accomplishment to players who did manage to unlock them. This becomes the most downvoted comment in Reddit history. So, locking premium parts of your full-priced game behind either hours of grind or spending even more money to unlock the cool stuff before other people who bought the same game as you. Now, it's important to understand that games having things locked within them is not necessarily bad design. One of my favourite games of all time is SSX Tricky, the snowboarding game, and as you play through that, you unlock new characters, new boards, and new tracks. Progression within a game, and rewarding that progression with new mechanics, new characters, and new areas is not bad. The problem was, progression wasn't the only way to unlock this. You could simply pay more money to get it immediately, and because it was a competitive game, people who paid the extra money were at an advantage over those who did not. This is a video about how newer games feel wrong, and it feels wrong to buy the same game as someone else and to know that they will have an advantage over you if they pay more. Throw that in the box.
Selling progression. So this is the ironic part, is that it didn't start in 2017. It started way earlier. And the first instance that I remember seeing it was, surprise, surprise, another EA game that we already spoke about, Battlefield 3. And I even pulled up, let's see, I thought I had it here. Here it is. So I pulled up this article from 2012, Battlefield 3 Unlock Everything DLC. So yes, this progression bypass was a thing back in 2012. But social media didn't really catch on like wildfire back then. So, you know, these articles, back then, it was just these different gaming magazines or articles or online forums would post these little articles, things like that, and discussions, and it wouldn't really gain as much traction as a Reddit post can today. So, yes, it's true. It is a piece of history, the most downvoted Reddit post ever, or at least up until now in the making of this video. EA holds that record. But selling progression is not something new. This has been going on for years and years and years. And specifically in Battlefield, I remember Battlefield 3, not Battlefront or whatever other EA game is. It was not, it was something that you had to progress. So when I spoke about that sniper rifle from the DLC that was better, you still had to level that up. And this is something that recurs and recurs and recurs of, even if you obtain the item, you still have to improve it. In Battlefield, that could mean you don't have the best barrel, which means you don't get as much bullet velocity, you don't get the sniper scope, you don't get this, you don't get that. Warzone, they do exactly the same thing. You don't get all of the attachments for the gun that actually make the gun the best it is. And the goal for these developers is to always change what is the meta, what is the best gun for that class. And the reason is so that the player either pays to progress the gun faster or spends that time in the game, which again attracts the attention of the player and keeps them playing that game versus another game. And you can go back to MapleStory, and where we see selling progression through the form of the gachapon. And gacha games have since then blown up with things like Puzzles and Dragons lasting 10 years now or something. So those early 2010s really still had a lot of selling progression. It's just it didn't really catch on as wildfire as like this is a problem for players back then, as it did in 2017 with Battlefront 2. I think maybe just it was the straw that broke the camel's back. The flood let loose, and everyone just let it out on EA, which frankly they deserve it because EA is an absolute monstrosity to the gaming industry. They really push the envelope on how much they can monetize a game. You look at Ultimate Team, that's EA. You look at selling progression, they do a ton of that. Loot boxes, you name it, they've done it. And they will employ all the psychological abuse of a player that they need. Every little bit of it. And I'll talk about Apex more later in this video and the things that they do. But let's continue.
Sort of abusive monetization. Why not? It's going to work. And then 5 years later, Diablo Immortal happened. Now, I've already covered Diablo Immortal pretty extensively in the video The Diabolically Immoral Diablo Immortal and its follow-up about the legendary crests, because it took basically every idea from the big box of abusive monetization and sprinkled them liberally over a somewhat Diablo-looking game, including multiple premium currencies, a deliberately similar in-game item which functions slightly differently to a paid version of the same thing, and multiple battle passes all called different things. But don't worry, because everyone assured me that Diablo Immortal was a mobile game, and
Diablo Immortal. Oh, wow, this was a wild ride. So he really glossed over Diablo Immortal, and as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this is a very concise 32 minutes. He talks about some very key points, turning points in gaming, in the gaming industry, in the community. But man, did Diablo Immortal really do go a lot further than that. So Diablo Immortal was not even a game developed by Blizzard Activision. It was a Chinese game that they reskinned and just slightly modified values and systems inside to fit the monetization that they required. So it was just a whole bunch of scum all added into one, and they spent 4 years tuning the psychological abuse and the monetization techniques of the game. 4 years was spent on that. Was on tuning those systems for monetization on a pre-made Chinese gacha system. This was already pre-made, skinned using mostly Diablo 3 textures and stuff, and maybe a few, whatever, custom skins or reskins or whatever, or new skins. And then the other 4 years was dedicated to the monetization. That's just to let you know how important monetization is to modern games.
Would not be representative of the actual next Diablo game, which would be Diablo 4. Everyone told me Diablo 4 would be a full game by itself, with no cash shop, with gameplay first, and none of the strategies from the big box of badness. So of course there are various digital versions of the game, the more expensive ones giving you an accelerated battle pass bonus, allowing you to progress quicker, and there is a cosmetic cash shop using its own proprietary currency. And if you're thinking Diablo doesn't need all these extra bells and whistles to be a good Diablo game, you are correct. These have not been added because they make the game better, they've been added because they make the game money. And then Dark Tide released, which is a full price game, with an abusively priced cash.
So let's cover, at this point, let's recap all the different abuses, and now some that he's spoken about, some that he hasn't spoken about. Diablo Immortal really encapsulated what is wrong with the gaming industry. They basically pushed every monetization technique, every psychological abuse to the limit. So it's a great point to recap what exactly they did. I say I wish I had it installed so I could open it and show you, but I probably don't want that installed on my system anymore. Not that I really spent that much money on it, but just because it's not a good experience. So, Diablo Immortal, one, they use that idea of step-ups in the cash shop with always something better. So, and that the amount of premium currency you receive did not align well with what was available in the game. It always left you with a little bit, or a pack up will give you a little bit more, but then it leaves you wanting a little bit more so that you could get the next best thing. The legendary crest system was very obscure. It was not clear how much of an item, the legendary crest, which was the gems, which got you gems, which were gacha only, basically just gacha characters, or whatever you want to call it. The gems were gacha only, and it was not clear how much of a gem you needed to upgrade it to max. It was in a very obscure system, it was well hidden. That's it. It just wasn't clear on what you needed to actually progress your gems, which was the main form of power in the game. And then add on the fact that it was randomized which gems you would actually get. So these are all things that that's something that Diablo Immortal did. Then they set the requirement that as you're going up in the level, you're required to play with more and more players. So we talked about it in the MapleStory part of the video, that competition aspect. One is that there was a PvP in Diablo Immortal, so there were multiple forms of PvP actually, guild v guild, as well as just PvP, but you had to go in solo. So again, the level of power that you had was incredibly important. You had to have the best gems to be able to place the highest, and there was one, oh, what was his name? I think it was J Money or something like that. He had spent $100,000 on Diablo Immortal in the first month or something, so that he could achieve a top place in PvP. And this was sadly relatively common. Maybe not on the level of 6 figures, but 5 figures was a relatively common occurrence in Diablo Immortal, so that they could place well. And then here's the kicker. And Diablo is not the first game to have done this, not by a long shot. Having games where there's a community aspect. So many gacha games do this with a guild system, some sort of guild system where players join, they compete with other guilds for an overall global placement or server placement, and then they receive scaled rewards based on their placements. And this is huge because this means that now every person in the guild is accountable to whatever standard the guild sets. If the guild sets the standard that you have to have 10,000 power, whatever that means for that game, that means that whenever this boss rolls around or whenever this event rolls around, you have to reach that goal. In Princess Connect, the level cap, which meant the level of your characters, increased right before a new event. So you would have to spend money to reach that new level so that you could get the max power. And so obviously, if you're talking about a top guild, a top competitive guild, this means that virtually every member of that guild is expected to make that expenditure to have the most power so that they can support the guild better. And then otherwise, your place was at jeopardy if you did not support the guild. So this has happened again and again and again and again with gacha games or gacha mobile games, and Diablo Immortal did it. I'm sure many MMOs have had those guild systems. I know that in World of Warcraft, I see articles popping up where people are taking out bank loans so that they can purchase in-game currency in World of Warcraft for first completion. So I think they race to complete the raids when they release. So the guilds race to complete the raid first. Usually it's a battle between the two top guilds that are going back and forth. But again, to be on that team, you have to put in the time and expense, whatever that expense is. Otherwise, your spot is in jeopardy, and it will probably go to someone else who is willing to make that expense. So, again, this is not something that's gacha-specific, Diablo-specific. This is very much an industry thing, is that idea that you are responsible for your spot in a community, that you have a responsibility to others in a game to either continue playing. So, I've seen this system a lot where the game, as one of the dailies, you check in to your guild, and then the guild receives a reward for you logging in that day. So for you might make the mental decision, I actually don't care about the daily reward. Like, I'm losing interest in the game, I don't care about the daily reward. But now I have to log in and check in so that the rest of my guild doesn't suffer. Even if I'm slowing down and won't be as strong as I really could be, I don't want the rest of my guild to suffer until they can replace me, whatever. So you're keeping this habit of the player still logging in because they have a commitment to everyone else. And as I mentioned, Diablo, to run just the dailies in Diablo, you still had to play with other players. the regular dungeons to get your gear was 4-player, meaning that you regularly had to find others to farm gear with you. And this is the kicker, is that, let's say the gear for Barbarian was not in the same location as the gear for the whoever else. I think there was the Necromancer, was another one in Diablo Immortal. So it was very key that you had friends that you would regularly play with, and this creates, again, so we spoke about the daily habit, and now we're speaking about the commitment aspect. Well, now you're committed, you're helping those people play, and if you don't log in that day and play for those 3 hours, well, now they can't farm, because it's a 4-player required dungeon. So you run into these things where all these different games are creating this idea that you are committed to other players. Because if you're just doing it for yourself, you always have that, that value analysis going on inside, where I hope that everyone watching this, at least by the end of it, will do that value analysis. Is this really the game I want to be playing? But then they shift that to, well, do I want to cause trouble for the rest of my friends? And so you build and you grow, you meet these people, and I have had lifelong friends that I've met through video games, through team-based games or guild-based games. So it's not that it's always an evil, is that you can have great experiences from it, but it does create that commitment to other players, especially when the game is looking at habit forming. So Diablo Immortal, we talk about the habit forming, the amount of currency they give you in the packs, that first time purchase, that $1, 800% extra value kind of thing like that. So to get that first purchase going, really obscure system with obscure rates. I could not go through the game documentation and figure out the average cost to actually max a gem. It was not there was not enough data in the game to actually determine that. The rates, the costs, and all of these things were not available in the game. So very obscure systems of hiding just how much you have to spend. And Diablo Immortal was one of those things where you had to combine multiple copies of the same item together. And now this is something that I've spoken about on other streams, not on this video yet, but on other streams, where combining the same item to make it stronger. Genshin does this, even Arknights does this to a lesser degree. But Genshin, when you pull for the character, there's skills that are still hidden and locked away that can even change how the character is played, but you have to pull a certain number of copies to unlock that skill. And this happened throughout the entire time that I played Genshin. I had my account for about a year until I just fully quit and just gave away the account. But I remember looking at all the new characters when I still had my account and seeing, oh yeah, but you had to pull, let's say, 4 copies to unlock this passive skill, or you had 6 copies and it changes this skill or this mechanic for the character to be stronger. So again, we go back to what's the next one? What's the next step? That sunk cost fallacy. I spent, let's say, $200 to get the character, but it's not completed. But I've already started the process. So I'm invested in this process of completing the character, and Diablo was completing the gem. And Diablo was, I'm using this word a lot, insidious. Man, because it was so obscure, I did not know what the next step was until I completed the previous step. At least in virtually every other game that I've seen with this system, it's one duplicate was one level up in game, let's say, one skill increase in game, whatever you want to call it. So Genshin was always 6. You got the base character and 6 duplicates to complete them, so you needed 7 total. I did not know how many duplicates I needed in Diablo. And I still don't know, because I Googled it. I was trying to research it to write about it. I couldn't couldn't find it. I couldn't find a documentation of how many duplicates I needed to complete a gem. How many duplicates of the gem itself, and how many just general fragments, which were obtained from dismantling other gems. I could not find it. Maybe it's available now. I didn't look. But again, these obscure systems. So you're invested in the process of... So by spending that first time and going for that gem, or maybe you lucked out and got the gem, and then you started upgrading it, and then you hit that wall. Well, I need more copies of it. How do you get more copies? Well, you spend more. And that's where it is. But I don't... But because this whole system was obscure in Diablo, I did not know how much that next level would be until I got there. And then I would see how much it would cost. But they weighed it in such a perfect way is that the amount that you've spent to get there already probably outweighs the next level. So again, what's one more? So when we talk about the pack upgrades for the amount of currency, well, it's 5 more. Or you get 5 more currency. I'm just buying that 5 more currency. In Genshin or other gacha games, I'm just getting 1 more copy of that character. And I've already spent this much, so that's sunk cost fallacy. I've invested X amount already, and I just need to spend Y amount more. And that Y is usually fixed. Roughly, there's either you can have an average or it is purely fixed. But yeah, so Diablo did that a lot. And then it was weighed in such a way that, well, I get 50% more power, but it's only going to cost me 10% of my current, of how much I've invested so far to get there. And then they keep going like that and like that, until you're really just fully invested in that, whatever it is, that gem. And then the price increases, but you're already so invested in that gem. You have like an emotional investment at this point of how much time and effort and money that you poured into this one item in Diablo. It's going to be perfect. And then they hit you with like the real paywalls, which really exponentially increase the price of the gem. I still don't know how much that gem costs to complete, how many copies you need, whatever. I didn't look it up past once I quit the game. But for my entire time playing the game, which was I think around 2 months, I never knew how much it would cost to complete a gem. I got them as far as my tiny little budget would get them, and I left them there. I put a limit up. I put a limit for myself, and I left it there. So yeah, you just really never knew. And these are, so again, there's so many things that Diablo Immortal really highlighted as these little tactics and strategies to monetize and monetize and monetize. Another thing that these games do is that virtually every game now has, they do this even in non-monetized games, showing you what's new. Let's go back to Eminence and Shadow. What's new? Oh, look, I have this little red star. This little red dot, you will see this in virtually every game that you ever play going forward. And it trains the user to click on and the games train the users to click on these little red dots. And like, for me, I don't play this game anymore, but I'm going, all these little red dots that I have to click. I have all these little things that I get for free or whatever. Oh my god, I have 12 hours left to claim these. Let me claim them. Oh yeah, and then it disappears. So I click the red dot and I get something. But then what do? They always put something in the cash shop. There's always something free, and in this game it's daily free pack. So every day a little red dot shows up, and I have to get rid of it. I have to go claim this. But while I'm doing it, I'm seeing all these paid packs. Oh, I wonder why those are there. So while they're not outright saying that, oh, look, we're always going to just leave a red dot there until you buy something or something like that. But every single day, I would have to go visit and purchase my daily free pack to get rid of this dot. So this red dot that each player is getting trained to go click and accept to receive something, this is something that is everywhere now. And every single game that I play, they train the players to click on these red dots or get rid of the notifications or whatever, and that's it. And there's always a notification. In most games, there's going to be a notification showing you new packs, or they're going to train you to just go look at new packs using these things like free daily packs. So, yeah. Diablo Immortal did the same thing. They had the daily free little reward that you could go claim in the cash shop. And I see it very, very commonly in a lot of gacha games. Arknights doesn't do it. But it is a very, very common tactic. Anyway, so I don't even know if I covered all the different little aspects of Diablo Immortal that happened and that really, really pushed the envelope for monetization. I mentioned the competition. I mentioned the commitment to other players. I mentioned the cash shop training, like that training of visiting the cash shop. I mentioned the obscure sunk cost fallacy that you hit, and that rationalization to just purchase that next level. That first time purchase. Diablo Immortal had the battle pass too. And the amazing thing, oh God, I'm going on another rant about Diablo now. Unhinged Diablo rant. The amazing thing about Diablo Immortal is that the key thing that you get from the battle pass was a gem. And remember I said, it was very obscure how many copies of a gem you needed to continue progressing it. So there were different ways to get copies of the gem, but the specific gem in the battle pass was something that was only available through certain limited passes. So whether this be a straight up purchase pack or a battle pass or something like that, it was something that was only available in these things. So once you started that process of collecting that gem, you started investing a lot of time and some money into leveling that gem up. And then you would have to go, and then because you're so invested in that gem and you can't get it anywhere else, well, you just keep buying the packs. Whatever, the packs that show up that have the gem, because you need copies of it. Or the next month's battle pass, so that you can get another 1 or 2 copies of the gem until you finish it. But remember, you don't know how many copies of the gem that needs, and for all I know, it's like 3 years to finish the gem. I don't really know, but anyway, I can only imagine how many battle passes you have to complete to finish that gem. But I'm not going to get further into that. But yeah, they had the battle pass system, and as Josh mentioned here, multiple battle pass systems, where I believe for most of them, the rewards were either more pulls for just that general pool of gems, or more copies of that limited gem. Anyway, let's continue with the video. Man, that was quite the unhinged rant about Diablo.
Shop, or you can grind for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours to get some of the cheap things in that shop. And now we're here. So why have games become like this? Simple, because games are businesses. Games have been businesses since arcades. Since consoles allowed you to buy the game and have it in your own home, they have always wanted to make money. But up until now, the best way to make the most amount of money was to make the best game you possibly could, because people would buy it, and that was it. The transaction was finished. It was fair. The best way to make money on modern games is to make the best framework as a holder for these strategies. And companies have experimented with various methods to increase income over the years, from gacha loot boxes to pre-orders, console exclusives to battle passes, energy systems to just straight up selling power. And instead of hiring game designers, they hired psychologists to build habits, to reinforce addictive behaviors, to design gameplay loops which encourage spending. The problem was, these techniques were never about the player having fun. They were about the...
So he talks quickly about a few different things. Pre-order bonuses. We haven't spoken about those, but pre-order bonuses, and logically, it makes a lot of sense that a game would want pre-orders and to encourage pre-orders. Think about it. If you have to spend 5 years paying developers without any income for that game, but you're paying those developers to build the game, test, do whatever. You have a whole QA team, quality assurance. You have the designers. There's a whole ton of different roles. I'm not going to get into all of them, but there's a ton of roles that go into building a game, like a good game like Elden Ring or whatever other game that you want to talk about. There's a lot of roles. Now, let's say it takes you 3 years to develop a game, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. It's in your best interest to start revenue early, and this doesn't happen just on video games. We look at the advent of Kickstarter. What did Kickstarter do? Well, people have ideas, but it costs money to bring those ideas to market. I had my own business ideas too, but this was way back when, and it was a lot more expensive. So if I wanted to hire an engineer, well, engineers aren't cheap. So let's say for me it was for audio products. Let's say I wanted to hire an engineer. Well, I'd probably have to spend upwards of $100,000 to $150,000 for a year of his time, for a year of his time, and I still don't know if my product will be viable after a year of spending with that engineer. Sennheiser spent, I think it was, again, I'm just off memory here, I think it was 4 years designing the Sennheiser HD800. And this was not just one engineer, this was a team of engineers. So clearly, and again, I'm just mentioning the engineer as one person in the loop. I would have to hire a lawyer for copyright purposes to ensure I have filed the copyright properly, and all these other things. I would have to do marketing, and there's tons and tons and tons of things, to where the cost is pretty significant for just somebody starting up that doesn't have a lot of cash. And that's where Kickstarter stepped in, which is amazing. So again, this idea of paying first for something that you will get later to support that business. So Kickstarter, the relationship and trade-off is usually that you will get a discount for supporting them in their setup process, because products are not always confirmed. There's costs associated. They don't always have enough funds, and this is pretty normal, especially in a startup. And I can definitely see video games being in the same boat. So it's normal that you would want to offset some of that cost early, because let's say you're borrowing money, you have to spend on interest costs. So in a video game world where, I don't know, let's say it's 2 years for full development of a game, you might have to start borrowing money to pay your developers and pay your staff and all this other stuff before you even start getting revenue. And that means for every part that you borrow, you're paying interest up until you actually earn the revenue to cover that. But then things started shifting. So on Kickstarter, you'll see these large companies releasing Kickstarters saying, and basically as a, well, we'll make it as long as you fund it. So the relationship for the pre-orders changed, where it's definitely in their best interest, but you're not doing it because you want to support them. You're doing it because otherwise you're missing something. In modern gaming, it's that every pre-order has a pre-order bonus associated, and it's always some limited exclusive. Always. It is something that you will never get again if you do not pre-order, and this is intentional. That fear of missing out. Players have been trained on that. In Elden Ring, or any online game, that fear of missing out could come into play in that, oh, well, it's something that they can flex, that competitive nature, even if it's not something that they're actually, that actually impacts them. In Elden Ring, I think it was a certain emote was only available on a pre-order bonus. Different games, you'll always see it's a cosmetic or maybe a little bit of a boost at the start or whatever it is. But there's always a pre-order bonus now. So that, yes, you're supporting them early, but are you doing it because you want to support them, like on, because you want to support that company and the development of that game, because you definitely want the next title? Like for me, I know that I will be pre-ordering Armored Core 6 from FromSoft. One is that I just really want to support FromSoft, but that I'm also a huge fan of the series of Armored Core. So, and then I want to see them continue developing and ensure that the game has a good development schedule. I pre-ordered back way when I used to play Total Annihilation, and then that turned into Planetary Annihilation. So some of the original developers down the line got together and made a Planetary Annihilation game. And I pre-ordered that too, so that I could support the development of that. But then these big companies that have endless reserves of cash, well, they're just abusing that whole relationship. And they're saying, okay, we'll have this pre-order exclusive. You're only going to be able to get this, whatever, weapon skin now, or whatever it is. Otherwise, you'll never get it again. And it's this thing where they're using it to get the revenue early, and then they don't even have to develop a good product anymore because they've already secured the revenue. So it's no longer about earning the revenue first so that you can really make a great game for the launch, and have to worry less about costs, interest costs, the maintenance of that. You just earned all the revenue, and now it no longer mattered what happened after. So these things, they really add up. And you'll see all these companies do it, whether it's for good reasons or not. And on Kickstarter, it was virtually the same thing, where people, instead of doing it from, oh, that's a really cool project, that should be a real thing. Here, have some money, you deserve it. Now, you're still expecting something down the line as a return for that investment, but it was still that it should have been viewed as something that you were investing that time and that money into that person or that group or whatever it is. And then people started treating Kickstarter as a marketplace. Well, I'm buying a product now, ignoring the fact that it's not even a product that's made yet. So, same with gaming. We're buying a product because we're promised a little something, and we're buying it up front, sight unseen. Anyway, it's this whole thing about pre-order bonuses that I really hate these days because, again, they're trying to create that FOMO in the player so that the player or the buyer or spender, whatever you want to call that person, purchases it up front. They get the revenue stream up front, even without giving a quality product in return. And this is a whole issue.
User being monetized. And when a marketing executive pictures you playing a game, you aren't pictured smiling and laughing with friends. You're pictured opening your wallet and reaching for your credit card, because that's their goal. And eventually, the Pandora's box of abusive monetization strategies was so full of proven, effective techniques that making a game is often no longer about the game, at least not for the people in charge of the money. The game is now simply a life support system for as many of these systems as you can design into it. The game is a host, and the parasite of monetization has begun to take over, and the unfortunate reality is this works. Even with a breakout incredible success like Elden Ring, which won Game of the Year and sold over 18 million copies as of this video, at $60 a sale, that's over $1 billion in sales worldwide. That is still slightly shy of how much money Genshin Impact made this year. It is still shy of how much money FIFA Ultimate Team has made every year for the last 4 years. The reality is, when companies look at that pie chart of game development time and how they divide developer time or invested money, that big box of abusive monetization strategies, that Pandora's box of terribleness, is so effective, they would be hurting their own profit to not put at least some of the techniques in. The older designers simply didn't have the knowledge of this box, and even if they did, they didn't have the technology to act on it at the time. Modern design often puts the player into an awkward position where the game has spent more time focusing on the manipulative, abusive systems than it has on just being the best game it could be. So what is the exact choice which makes games feel wrong? Is it MapleStory's fault for adding gachapon? Is it Oblivion's fault for the horse armor? Is it Dota's fault for the battle pass? FIFA's fault for the success of Ultimate Team? Is it Farmville's fault for mastering the addiction cycle? Or is it EA's fault for locking away Darth Vader? Unfortunately, it's kind of all of them. It's just the reality of games design today. You cannot close the lid on Pandora's box. Designers can't unknow the effectiveness of these techniques, and every game made for the rest of time has to either use them or actively choose to avoid them. So the exact choice that makes a game go from being the best it can possibly be to anti-player or anti-consumer is when a designer or a marketing executive stops thinking about how they can make the best game they're capable of and starts throwing some sly glances toward the box in the corner. And when they say, hey, this technique may not fit our game perfectly, but it's proven to make a lot of money. Do you think we could put it in our game? That is the moment any specific game goes downhill from what it could be from a player's perspective. And the worst part is that big evil box.
If you speak to game developers, Some of the times they aren't even aware of how management wants them to implement monetization. So they think they might be coming in, they think it's just going to be XYZ, they're making a game, this is the story, these are the characters, and then management, either through a different team or forcibly down, they say, okay, but now create a loot box system, and now we'll put the characters in the loot box. So it's crazy. It's something that it's not the developers that are actively, or I mean, some may not, but it's not always even just the developers that are actively choosing. It's management that it's for profit. It is purely for profit that a lot of these monetization techniques come out. And I said I'd speak later about Apex and Warzone. These are online games that I am definitely familiar with. So I spoke a lot about the gacha mechanics that they use, or the gacha games use to really push how much players spend in those games. But think of it this way. Let's say that you spent every day you spent an hour in a game. Over a year, that's 365 hours. At the end of the year, you say, okay, well, I haven't spent anything in this game, but there's something I want now. And then you think back, well, I spent 365 hours in this game. So the games also help, or also create the system where they equate time with money. Usually there's pay to progress. It could be something that you might only be able to obtain 1 per week, but if you purchase it, you can obtain 2 a week or 3 a week or whatever it is. So, yeah. These games all start to equate time and money for the player. And so let me talk a bit about Apex and Warzone. So, especially Apex, there's not anything that you unlock naturally anymore. EA has removed all of that from the game. You don't go in and you can't level up a character or earn achievements anymore. It's virtually everything that you ever get is paid for in Apex Legends now. You have to pay for all of it. And you might say, oh yeah, well, I earned a free pack and got a cool heirloom or whatever it is. But the thing is, packs, again, as I mentioned earlier, packs are basically a currency in the game. So whether you got them for free or you paid for the packs, the outcomes can be the same. But again, for every player to be able to get the same thing, some of them will have to spend. So you can look at it even as that free pack. It's something that you purchased. And so gacha games have done this, Apex have done this. They're building that habit of people opening gacha packs. Every gachapon game that I've ever seen and played will always have free pulls in the gachapon for different events or this or that. Because they're building that psychological feeling, that high that you get when you pull whatever you wanted, even off something free. But then you might hit a dry spell, and naturally, I mean, you're not going to hit it every time, but you're going to want it again. And so Apex is the same thing. Well, you get one heirloom, which only works for one character, but now you want more. So, oh, well, I don't play just that character. I play other characters too. You're going to want more. In all the gacha games, usually you don't just have one character, you have a team of characters. So, well, I got the best thing for this slot, but I need this other character too to pair with it. Whatever it may be, or I need a duplicate. All the games have these free pull systems. And this is the scary part. This is what I really wanted to focus on the gacha aspect. These are free-to-play games that do not strictly enforce age requirements. Now, they'll always ask you have to be at least 13 and not over. And the sad part is that even at 13, do they really recognize all of the dangers of a gacha game? I've seen people spend thousands, and I've seen kids on these Discord communities, Reddit communities, different communities, I've seen kids either overtly say, or specifically say they are under the age of 18 or whatever, or just in their writing style, it was very obvious that they were not as developed mentally, so I figure they're under 18. And the games allow that anyway. But I've seen kids get addicted to these systems. And I've seen kids go and ask their parents, their grandparents or whatever, for their birthday gifts, their Christmas gifts, whatever holiday they celebrate gifts, go and ask for gift cards that they can use in these games. They've become addicted to that high, and they don't even realize it. So the amazing thing about these free-to-play games is that because there's no upfront purchase, it's really accessible to just about anyone in the world. Whether it be on a mobile platform, some gaming platforms, the whole idea is to be able to be accessed by virtually anyone. Warzone less so, where system requirements are pretty high because the game is terribly optimized. But yes, the goal is, especially for mobile games, that it's just virtually accessible anywhere. So that they can train those players on that platform, and the more players that they have, the more that they can convert with the right tactics. And whether they are 18 and over or less than 18, doesn't matter. There's always ways to, even if they are not spending players now, become entrenched in that idea that money is progress in these games. And I've had these discussions in the last year with different gacha streamers, different people in the communities that I visit or run. A lot of these younger people, for the past 10 years, have only been exposed to this. Like, basically their entire gaming lives have only been exposed to these kinds of pay-to-win aspects. Whether it's pay to progress, pay for a gachapon that gives you a stronger character that helps you progress, whatever it is, pay to remove some limitation, is that I've been watching this happen for years and years and years, and it's gotten to the point where players are completely entrenched in this idea that they have to keep paying into a game. And this is where, is gaming in the future going to look the same? Or can you even purchase a game in the future that you have a full game without monetization? Will it be possible? Will development ever happen? Because investors are always looking for the greatest rate of return, and the greatest rate of return is going to hit on the monetization techniques. Will governments step in and put a stop to this? I've always been fond of the idea that anything with a loot box should be 18 and over. And that includes mobile gachapon games, even with slight loot box mechanics, where there is a paid aspect. And this is difficult because RPGs of the past, you could kill an enemy, and even Elden Ring, if you've played Elden Ring, the enemy doesn't always drop the same item. There are just basic enemies around the world that have a varying number of drops, and they're all random. So MapleStory and other gacha games have basically extracted that essence of doing something for a random outcome, some good, some bad, into a monetary thing. So remember, time equals money. They took that idea that instead of farming it, you can now just purchase it outright, and now you can only purchase it outright. But to the player, they're always trying to equate time equals money to try and make it the same thing to the player. And so basically your wallet is basically just a resource that you can spend in the game. And this is actually something that I've seen people say, and that they're totally okay with. That their wallet is just a resource that they can spend in the game. It's just part of the game's resources. So hopefully we can cut off that whole wave, or whatever you want to call it, that weed. Cut off that weed from growing further of spending, of just your wallet being a resource. I hate that idea. And now speaking about Apex, other aspects that they're using, different matchmaking techniques to get players into the habit of returning. Things like rank decay. Literally the only thing that the player can earn on a regular basis is their ranking, and that decays significantly every season, or every split, which is 45 days, and a season being 90 days. So hence the season pass being 90 days. And the big goal of this is, remember what I talked about sunk cost fallacy, or that willingness to make that first purchase, because, well, every season they log in, or every split they log in to go back to their rank, and that might take them 100 hours over 45 days. So let's say on average it's 100 hours for over 45 days to return to their previous rank. That's another 100 hours that they've invested, and they're doing this, let's say, 8 times a year. An 800 hour a year aspect, and this is probably relatively common among the more active Apex players, where they're spending about 800 hours a year. I'm playing on a friend's account. I played on a friend's account recently, and he had over 2,000 hours over about the 2 years that he played. So I completely believe that this is intentional. They are doing this in a way so that the players are logging in. And again, Battle Pass, same thing. It'll take you maybe about 100 hours over the course of the 200 hours over the course of the entire season to complete the Battle Pass. And this is all intentional to keep you playing the game as much as possible, so that you are able to rationalize the purchase in that game for whatever amount that they're asking down the road. And so this goes back to the idea of even training kids, even if they're not seeing a monetary investment for that free-to-play kid that's been playing for the past 2 years immediately, they know that they're training that kid to, in the future, be a spender in these games. Whether it's Apex as a PC game, whether it's a mobile game like Eminence and Shadow, Genshin Impact is a big one that's doing this, whatever. These monetization techniques are here. They're here now. They're probably going to keep being developed. And as we saw with Diablo Immortal, they spent 4 years optimizing the monetization for revenue. And that to me is crazy. It is absurd, but it happened. So if you don't want to see stuff like that, we're probably going to need government intervention down the road. And I believe in Japan, early on, there used to be a gachapon system called comp gacha, or complete gacha. And this was something where you had to earn, or basically pull, until you received 5 parts of something, or however number of parts you needed to complete that item, to actually get that item. So let's say you needed part A, part B, part C, part D, part E, and all of them could be separated into different gachas, and then once you got them all, you created this ultimate item. So this was considered a comp gacha. But now it just shifted to, well, duplicates give you an advantage so that they're not completely wasted, but really, you're doing the same thing. Now, comp gacha was kind of banned in Japan, but other governments around the world did not do the same, even though gacha games are a global thing now. Most games get translated and published in a global, like in English language and maybe some other languages, mostly coming from China or Japan first. And so these governments around the world have not stepped in to make any changes to the industry at this time. So it's quite important to be aware of where we are right now, what can be done. So again, if you feel that gacha should... I should probably be fair. So I'm going to say, if you feel gacha should completely die off, then obviously you can't support gachas. Don't even download them as a free user, because these gachas also track, for investor purposes, how many active players they have. How addictive is their game? And they consider you just, even if you're completely free, but you're logging in and playing the game, you're a user of their platform. And so they use that for investment purposes. Epic Games, same thing. Epic Games with their free games, same thing. Even if you don't like Epic, oh, but it's cool. I'm getting free games off of them. Haha, I'm stealing so much money from them. No, to them it's not. It's not the free game. It's the fact that you are a user of their platform. They're creating a habit in you to continue visiting their platform to claim that free game, whatever, every week or daily, in the case of Christmas season. So remember, these companies are out for profits. Even if it is a quote-unquote free product, you're still being trained to do something. So again, I'll quickly talk about the positives of these systems, in that, similar to Kickstarter, where the positive is that you can give somebody a chance to develop something, a business that they would not have had the money to do otherwise, because banks are not going to give loans to that amount to a single person, whatever. Similarly with gacha games and other games with constant monetization, is that it means that the game can last longer. Puzzles and Dragons lasted, I think they're at 10 years now, maybe 11 years. As of the making of this video, that's a long time for a game to be running with updates. You look at World of Warcraft, similarly, it's a long time to be running. But how do they do it? It's because they have a subscription, so there's a constant revenue from the players. And this is the key aspect from games like Elden Ring, where, you know, they don't receive constant updates. They might receive 1, 2, 3 DLC, whatever. But then that's it. Eventually, the entire staff moves on from that project to games like Genshin Impact, which is a gacha game, or Puzzles and Dragons, another gacha game, Apex Legends, a first-person shooter. I believe Halo is supposed to be of that type of style, where it's one game. CSGO is now free to play, but with microtransactions, they're able to keep continuing on and keep developing the same game. While they are making CSGO 2 now, but it's all going to carry over anyway. It's just a new engine and new server style. So I'm kind of considering CSGO 2 as just part of CSGO. Either way, these are all things that are done using that revenue from those microtransactions. So games like Arknights, Genshin Impact, I believe they spent several $1 million just on the music for Genshin Impact. And then they're creating more and more and more of this content for their game on a regular basis. And if you are a fan of the game and want them to continue updating and creating new experiences in that game, if you like the engine, the style, whatever it is, gacha games or other battle pass or monetization systems are there to allow the developers to do that, so that they can create that framework. And it doesn't mean that the frameworks are always the lowest common denominator. Some frameworks are generally very well made, and that players can enjoy the system and want to see it continue and succeed. So there are positives to the system. There are many, many, many negatives to the system as well. That whole idea of monetization, and where the industry has led to just trying to extract as much possible for as little investment. But again, there are positives. So we have to weigh the positives and the negatives. I always say be very critical of the games that you're playing, whether it's a PC game that's a one-time purchase, free-to-play game, even if you've never paid, whatever. Be very critical of the game and the systems that they're using in that game to extract money from people. Because even if it doesn't affect you, it can affect the next person. So while I've seen many people say, "Oh yeah, well, I set myself a hard limit, $50 a month on this game," and then I've seen people say, "Okay, well, I'm only going to spend $50, and then they end up spending $500 on whatever month because they wanted that extremely limited character. It's not fair to say that everyone should have the same level of self-control as you. Some people just don't. And we should be trying to support those people versus just making fun of them for spending that much money when they really couldn't afford it, I should say. I should really confirm that part. Some people, they can afford it and they say, oh, well, I love doing this, and they just keep doing it. But we're really targeting the people that are addicted that shouldn't be partaking in this system. So there are people with weak self-control, and this is very important, and we should support those people as well. And these games are very much designed to absolutely destroy these people with weak self-control. So while the person has some responsibility to games, remember Diablo, they invested 4 years and probably millions of dollars on psychologists and developers to tweak things, probably test teams and all of that stuff to really ensure that it was as addictive as possible and to break people so that they lose their self-control in those games. So remember the different topics I talked about, the monetization techniques, the psychological techniques and strategies that they employ. Even if it's a free-to-play game, they're still training you. There are still benefits to these systems, but you have to make sure that you are getting a benefit from these systems if you are paying into them. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed my rant, my reaction to Josh Strife's video. I hope it was informative. I'm seeing the recording time. It is upwards of 2 hours. So I'm assuming that nobody's going to watch this. But if you did watch it, thank you so much for doing it. And I hope this was informative. I hope you were able to form your own opinions on the topic and be able to have these more in-depth discussions with other people that are playing these games, and hopefully we'll see a different future for games where players are not expected to treat their wallet as a resource in the game. So thank you, and have a good day.